Early life of the Prophet, parentage of Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Quraysh family was a famous branch of the Ismailite Arabs. There was a powerful man named Fir who was descended from Ismail. Fir's another name was Quraysh, and hence all his descendants are called Quraysh after him. In the 5th year of the Christian era, one of the descendants of Fir, Qusay by name, united all the tribes of the Quraysh and took possession of Hijaz in the charge of the Kaaba. For the convenience of administration, he built a council hall, Dar-un-Nadwa, where the leaders of the Quraysh used to assemble from time to time for public business. Qusay proved himself a capable administrator by supplying food and water to the pilgrims during the period of pilgrimage. After the death of Qusay, his son Abd-ud-Dar became the ruler of Hijaz, and more especially of Makkah. But on his death, there arose a dispute over the administration of Hijaz between his grandsons and the sons of his brother Abd-Manaf. It was ultimately decided that Abd-Shams, son of Abd-Manaf, would be in charge of the revenue, and the grandsons of Abd-ud-Dar were to look after the military. But sometime after this arrangement, Abd-Shams gave up the responsibility of administration to his younger brother Hashim, who was fit to shoulder the task. Hashim was the popular figure in Arabia for his bravery and generosity, but Umayyah, son of Abd-Shams, became envious of his uncle's position and power. He challenged the right of Hashim as to his success in the open field, but he had to admit defeat, and according to the decision of the judges, he was banished from the country for 10 years. Hashim, the great-grandfather of Muhammad, married a lady of Medina, and the result of this marriage was a son named Shabi. On the death of Hashim, his brother Muttalib brought Shabi to Medina. The people of Medina thought that Shabi was the slave of Muttalib, and so they called him, through mistake, Shabi Abdul Muttalib. The latter name is now known only as Abdul Muttalib in the history of Islam. The generosity and fair-mindedness of Abdul Muttalib won for him an undisputed position among the Quraysh who recognized his overlordship. But Harb, the son of Umayyah, refused to accept his supremacy. The decision of the judges again went against him, as it did in the case of his father. Thus, there sprang up a jealousy between the Banu Hashim and the Banu Umayyah, and the struggle for power between the two in the subsequent generation had its root in the past. Abdul Muttalib, an old man of nearly 70, had several sons and daughters. When he was ruling over Hijaz, Abraha, the Christian chief of Yemen, invaded Makkah and the house of Kaaba. On the occasion of his march towards Makkah, the chief rode on the elephant, and as the Arabs had never seen before such an animal, the year 570, in which the invasion took place, is known in history as the Year of Elephant. The army of Abraha was destroyed partly by an epidemic and partly by a terrible storm of rain and hail. Prior to this event, Abdul Muttalib took his youngest son, Abdullah, to the house of Wahab, the chief of the Banu Zora clan, and there he gave his son in marriage to Amina, the daughter of Wahab. Abdullah remained with Amina only for 3 days at her father's house. He then left his wife and started for Syria on a mercantile expedition. On his way back, he fell ill at Medina and died there, leaving behind him 5 camels, a flock of goats, and Ayman, a slave girl. This little property Muhammad inherited from his father. Both Abdul Muttalib and Amina were very much shocked at the death of Abdullah. Birth and early life of Muhammad. The widowed Amina gave birth to a son on Monday, the 12th Rabiul Awwal, 570 A.D. The child was named Muhammad, by his grandfather, and Ahmad by his mother. Both these names are mentioned in the Holy Quran. According to the custom of Arabia, the charge of the child's upbringing was entrusted to Halima, a woman of the Bani Sa'd. Muhammad began to grow up in the lap of Halima. For 5 years he had to live with her among the Bani Sa'd. During these 5 years, his speech was formed upon one of the purest models of the beautiful language of the peninsula. As such, it was his pride in after days to say, "Verily, I am the most perfect Arab amongst you. My descent is from the Quraysh, and my tongue is the tongue of the Bani Sa'd." Muhammad, peace be upon him, ever retained a grateful impression of the kindness of the Bani Sa'd. He had the highest respect and regard for Halima, and he did not fail to show it when the latter visited him after his marriage with Khadijah. In the 6th year of his life, Muhammad was sent to the care of his mother. The noble lady, in order to show her boy to the maternal relatives of his father, set out for Madinah along with her slave girl. Arriving at Madinah, she alighted at the house where her husband had died and been buried. But on their way back to Makkah, they reached a place named Al-Abwa, where Amina fell sick and died. After her burial there, the orphan was carried back to Makkah by Ayman, who was a faithful nurse of the child. In his 7th year, Muhammad began to feel the desolation of the orphan state. The charge of the orphan was now undertaken by Abdul Muttalib, whose guardianship lasted only for 2 years. The would-be world prophet was thus bereaved of his parents and grandfather at a very tender age. After Abdul Muttalib, the sole charge of the orphan was placed on his uncle Abu Talib, who faithfully and kindly discharged his duties. His fondness for the lad was so great that he made him sleep by his bed, eat by his side, and go with him wherever he walked abroad. This tender treatment was continued till he emerged from the helplessness of childhood. As his uncle was not solvent, Muhammad had to work for his bread. He had often to tend flock of sheep and herd of camels on the neighboring hills and valleys. From his childhood, his sensitive nature was alive to the suffering of the poor and the distressed. He was of a meditative turn of mind and loved solitude. Sweet and amiable in nature, he was honored and loved by his own people. His strict adherence to truth, his scrupulous honesty, unflinching faith, and stern sense of duty earned for him the title of Al-Amin, the trustee. At the age of 12, Muhammad accompanied his uncle for business to Syria. There he met with a Christian saint named Bahira, who took Muhammad for the last prophet and spoke highly of him. During this time, a sacrilegious war broke out at the fair of Ukaz, in which all tribes of Arabia were involved. The Hashemites of Arabia were also engaged in this war. In one of the battles, Muhammad attended upon his uncle Abu Talib. He marked the stages of the war as an observer. When he found that thousands of lives were going to be swept away by the internecine war, he formed a peace committee named Halful Fusul with the help and cooperation of a band of energetic youths. The object of this committee was to maintain peace and order and to establish cordiality among the different tribes in Makkah. Muhammad, Ali, and Khadijah. The fame of Muhammad, peace be upon him, had spread by this time throughout Arabia. Khadijah, on hearing of the sincerity and truthfulness of Muhammad, peace be upon him, invited him to her house and requested him to take charge of her business. Muhammad, peace be upon him, with the consent of his venerable uncle, went to Syria in charge of Khadijah's venture. After his departure, the mind of Khadijah was filled up with the thought of Muhammad, peace be upon him. She had all this time been waiting for his arrival. In Syria, Muhammad, peace be upon him, made great profit by his honesty and intelligence, and added to the fortune of Khadijah. When he came back and stood before her, she was much impressed by the charming personality of her agent. The noble widow was then 40 years of age. She had been twice married and had borne 2 sons and a daughter. The leading men of the Quraysh sought her hand in marriage, but she rejected all their offers. The tender emotions excited by the visit of Muhammad, peace be upon him, however, overpowered her resolution. She wanted to marry him, and the marriage was performed with the consent of his uncle. Then Muhammad, peace be upon him, was 25. This was a happy and fortunate union. Khadijah fully appreciated the noble genius and commanding personality of Muhammad, peace be upon him. She allowed him to enjoy his leisure hours undisturbed and free from care. In moments of depression and sadness, she proved a never-failing source of solace to him. Muhammad, peace be upon him, said later in his life that when nobody believed in his mission, Khadijah believed in him. When he was friendless, she befriended him, and when he was helpless, she helped him. When he was 50, Khadijah passed away from this land of living to the land of bliss. With her, he lost a faithful friend and a sincere guide. He had several children by her, but they died in infancy, except the daughters, only the youngest of whom, Fatima, wife of Hazrat Ali, lived to see the great events of her father's life. After his marriage with Khadijah, Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to go to a cave of Mount Hira, not far from Mecca, and spend a month every year in meditation. One night, as he lay in the cave, wrapped in his Arab mantle, a voice spoke to him and bade him read. He trembled with awe and said that I could not read. When a third time the voice ordered him to read, he read in the name of Allah. Thus the Holy Quran was first revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the month of Ramadan.